Morning, everyone. This is Anish. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. This is Anish Banokar. I'm a product manager on the Prisma Access team, responsible for the Prisma Access 3.2 release. So in this session, what I'm going to talk about is the features that have already been released as part of the 3.2 update for Prisma Access. The GA is publicly available now. So you should be able to access all these features right away. So just kind of taking a deep dive into what are the core innovations that we're bringing to the market with Prisma Access 3.2. Bear in mind, there are more innovations coming to the market as part of ADEM, which are not included in this update, but they're very much part of the Prisma Access and the SASE program. So just kind of starting with the three innovation areas. The first one that I'm going to focus on is Prisma SASE. Prisma SASE is how are you going to thinking about the SASE platform, and how are we simplifying not just the setup for Prisma Access and Prisma SASE in general, but also how are we making it simple for connecting applications to users. The second area that I'll be kind of talking about would be enhanced security. What are the core security innovations that we're bringing to market with Prisma Access 3.2? And finally, simplified operations. This is one of the innovation areas where we are driving towards making it extremely simple for users to adopt and use Prisma Access and all its innovative features. So this will be kind of talking about location, geographic expansions, and activating the service in general. Just kind of talking about Prisma SASE, one of the core pillars for the Prisma Access, just kind of going back just on the same slide. Just one of the core areas that we are focusing on for SASE is the ZDNA connector. The ZDNA connector dramatically simplifies internal app access, and this is for modern cloud native, containerized, microservices, legacy, all kind of apps, by recognizing what are the apps running on your data centers and and data centers could be private cloud, public cloud, or just kind of on-prem colo locations or your own data center. But ZDNA Connector simplifies that internal app consumption for private applications. The other feature that we have as part of the Prisma SASE is private application NAT. So we will be talking about how do you simplify and speed up some of the Prisma Access onboarding with a reduced upfront client IP pool requirement. In enhanced security, the core features that we'll be talking about are advanced TP and advanced URL filtering. Now, advanced threat prevention blocks unknown and evasive command and control traffic, and it does that in line with unique deep learning models. It's the only IPS to solve unknown C2 and offer best-in-class protection. And the second one is advanced URL filtering. Advanced URL filtering provides best-in-class web protection, and it does that by augmenting the capabilities of the existing URL database with real-time web protection to, again, contain a lot of like these phishing attacks, which are more evasive and cannot just be recognized using a URL database. We'll be talking about unified SSE product, which basically integrates all the rich capabilities, all the rich security capabilities into one dashboard. And we are building more capabilities, right? So we already had CASB. We are bringing in SSPM and DLP, as well as Prisma Access and Prisma SD-WAN, everything under one dashboard. We are also simplifying some of our authentication capabilities for machine auth for devices that don't really have an interface with Kerberos authentication with Explicit Proxy. And finally, talking about simplified operations, we are simplifying the activation and tenant management for Prisma Access. So how do you kind of go from start with the demo setup, start with the lab, like a trial tenant, and how do you convert that trial to a production tenant? How do you manage your different add-on services? We're kind of doing a lot of enhancements in the activation, and we'll keep continuing simplifying that process in the future as well. We are adding more bandwidth to remote networks. So we're going from 500 Mbps to 1 Gbps with full SSL decryption for remote network support. And then we are also activating new regions as part of that release. And you'll see all these different things as themes that will continue investments in the future as well. So how do you consume this? So going to the next slide, we're just going to talk about there are two release options for 3.2. One is what we call as a preferred release, which is the default release that all the customers get. With that, you will be able to access next-gen CASB unified management for DLP, SAS, SSPM, everything. That's part of the preferred release. You also have simplified activation, 1 Gbps RN support, and the new regions will be available to everyone. As part of the innovation release, we'll have ZDNA Secure Connector, Private Application NAT, Advanced DB, Advanced URL Filtering, and Explicit Proxy with Kerberos. The innovation release is not the default option, it's something that the customers have to request for. So just kind of providing an overview of how to consume some of these innovations and what's the default versus the non-default option. Just kind of next, what we'll do is just going to talk about what is required or what are the upgrade paths to going to move to 3.2 plugin. So if you just kind of talking about, so if you want to move to Prisma Access 3.2, there are a few things that you need to kind of think about. But the first one is, what does the path look like? So if you are on 2.2 preferred, you need to migrate to 3.0, 3.1, and then migrate to 3.2. There are no direct upgrades from 2.2. The same thing is if you're running a version which is older than 2.2, you have to kind of go through that path. And then we'll kind of talk about more prerequisites in a couple of slides, but if you need to upgrade to innovation, as I mentioned, that's not a default option. What you'll need to do is reach out to your account representative and submit a request to upgrade your tenant to 3.2 innovation. I see a couple of raised hands. What we'll do is we'll take questions at the end of the session. So just want to kind of call that out. So just kind of talking about Prisma SASE and the first innovation that we are bringing to the market with ZDNA Connector. We are seeing a rapid shift in the market, specifically in terms of migration to containerized and microservices-based cloud-native applications. In fact, Gartner predicts that 75% of organizations will be running containerized applications, even on-prem. This is not about cloud. And what that is driving is a trend to kind of break the monolith and move from one monolith applications to an application that's running multiple services, such as chat, payment, interactive health. There are a lot of different functions. So when you're going to think about providing access to such complex applications, you are forced to grant broad access to that application, but it has multiple services running within it. What we're trying to do with ZDNA is make sure that you have a lot more control over your applications without violating any of these ZDNA principles. So that's where we are introducing the ZDNA connector. The ZDNA connector, just moving to the next slide, the ZDNA connector will provide fine-grained access to modern cloud-native applications. And what we're doing with ZDNA connector is moving away from IP addresses and make that access to applications more app-focused. So with this, there are a couple of things that ZDNA connector would do. ZDNA connector will discover cloud-native applications, traditional applications, all kinds of applications that are running on your private data center. And it will, once it has detected, you will have the option to create security policies. One of the other things that we're doing with ZDNA Connector is we are auto-creating some of these policies that can be leveraged, but you can always tweak it and customize them as per your needs. So what does that look like? What does ZDNA connector look like? So ZDNA connector would be, to move to the next slide, it'll be a virtual appliance that you can actually host in your private cloud, which can be a data center, colo facility, or a public cloud where you're running your private apps like AWS, GCP. It's a VM that has a 10 gig pipe that connects back to the Prisma Access. And what the ZDNA connector would do is it connects to the closest Prisma Access location, providing the least latency and improving the user experience. As I mentioned, scales up to 10 gigs, and it's a fully automated solution to discover those private applications. And even if you have networks, there is no exposure to internal IP. So make what I'm as I kind of talk about the solution, I'm not talking about IPs, right? So it's completely app-based. So even if you have different data centers with overlapping IP addresses, you can connect all those data centers back into Prisma Access with the app-based mechanism, with recognizing, publishing all those apps on Prisma Access and having security policies for each and every application. And this is in line. So kind of moving to the next slide, this entire ZDNA connector initiative is, as well as service connection for the matter, both of these are in line with the Prisma Access 2.0 principles. Again, what are, just want to make sure we kind of reiterate, what are the ZDNA 2.0 principles, because that's something we not spend time on. But we are doing continuous trust verification, continuous security inspection. Those are two core principles, along with least privilege access for all data and all applications. So we protect all data and we protect all applications. And that's what ZDNA Connector will enable you to do with the app-based mechanism. So moving to the next slide and kind of talking about the other innovation that we are bringing to the market, which is private application NAT. So today, when you can have a mobile user deployment, you have to provide IP address space to access private applications. And that IP address space has to be corporate, like routable IP space from the GP agent all the way to your private applications. So you have to share that space. The issue is sometimes customers who have a large scale might not have those IP addresses available. Even though they're private IP, they might not have those available. As a solution, what we've developed is a private application NAT. With the private application NAT, by default, we will provide R6598 address space for a GP agent for a mobile users and NAT that app traffic to a subnet of your choice with this NAT layer. So the benefit for the customer is we are simplifying and speeding up the onboarding of Prisma Access with reduced IP requirement upfront. And we aren't asking, we're drastically reducing the number of private IP address space which is needed, because now instead of kind of providing an IP space for every user, you're doing it for every service connection tunnel for the matter. So that's the benefit of private application NAT. So those are two innovations that I wanted to talk about as part of our Prisma SASE initiative. Next, moving on, we're going to talk about advanced URL filtering. So this is one of those innovation features that we're bringing to market. The reason that we need innovation is because we are leveraging a lot of the investments of PanOS as part of this update. So with our 3.2 innovation and advanced URL filtering, what we are doing is we are augmenting the existing URL database with some advanced capabilities. So what we're seeing in the market is we are seeing a lot of new attack vectors originating every day, and using web crawlers basically we can only detect a percentage of that, and that's where this advanced URL filtering comes in. With the advanced URL filtering, we augment a lot of that data that we already captured from the web crawlers. But a lot of these URL sites that customers visit as part of the phishing attacks and whatnot, sometimes they are not known, or sometimes web crawlers might not have access to it because they might be behind a captcha or whatnot, right? So as part of that, with advanced URL filtering, we are bringing in a mechanism to detect and also a cloud-based mechanism to basically detect some of these unknown and evasive web attacks that might not be accessible not for us, and no other vendor actually does that today. So we're the first vendors to kind of do that. So as part of that, what we do is we took at live URL strings, not just the web crawler data, and we detect new attacks. So that way we kind of detect the patient zero attacks coming on. We do this in line, and we send a lot of the workloads to the cloud. We analyze those workloads and come back with a judgment in terms of what is the security threat. And this is even live web content. We are sending full payloads to significantly increase the detection powers. And the last thing is we are with this, at least based on the industry data that we've seen, we are the only vendor to do this, and we have been able to contain 90% or more of modern phishing attacks with this inline detection mechanism. No other vendor in the industry can do that today. And you'll be able to do or leverage all these capabilities with Prisma Access 3.2 innovation release. Just kind of moving next and kind of talking about advanced threat prevention. So with advanced threat prevention, we are the industry's first IPS to stop unknown command and control attacks. Now, what we are doing with this is we detect and prevent the command and control communication over SSL, HTTP, all kinds of traffic, right? And all the data that is not detected by a standard threat prevention capabilities that we already have is sent to a cloud-based inline architecture. And we get a judgment almost immediately in real time. And we can detect and stop a lot of these attacks that we kind of originate, or what we call as a patient zero attacks. So with this, what we have seen out there is 48% of all unknown C2 attacks have been stopped. We are increasing the detection power by 48% for all of these attacks that weren't known before. So that's a huge advantage in addition to the threat prevention services that we already are offering. And we'll keep investing more on some of these inline deep learning and machine learning capabilities as we kind of get more innovations to the market. So again, this advanced threat prevention is one more feature that is part of the 3.2 innovation release. Moving to the next slide. Just kind of talking about Kerberos authentication for explicit proxy. So as you might be aware, explicit proxy is one of those access mechanisms that was introduced slightly about a year ago. We are enhancing those because what we realized is a lot of customers have all these devices that need machine auth mechanisms because they can't leverage SAML, they don't have a web browser, these are headless devices. So because of that, we are using explicit proxy. We're introducing explicit proxy rather for Prisma Access for 3.2. So with this, customers can basically do one pack file for all their devices that need explicit proxy support. And then you have a single sign-on experience for servers and non-user systems using Kerberos authentication for explicit proxy. So we are enabling that today with explicit proxy in the 3.2. Again, this is a 3.2 innovation release that we will be releasing to customers with 3. Yeah, I think this is already out there, so we will be enabling customers to use this. That's all that I had as part of the security services. I'm going to spend some time on simplified operations, and then we can handle any questions that are out there. This is we're going to talk about simplified activation. This is what the best way to kind of enable and activate Prisma Access services from a single dashboard. So today there are some, based on the research that we did, we found issues with activating a lot of these services. There are multiple interfaces that you have to interact with to activate the product. There are multiple stakeholders like sales, IT services that you need to kind of be looking out for. And in some scenarios, there was no clear visibility on the licenses activated and what add-ons are available. And we want to simplify that entire experience for the customers. So with the Activation 2.2, we will have a user-friendly new dashboard that would enable a simplified experience for the customers from a single pane of glass. And you will be able to manage all your subscriptions. You will be able to purchase licenses, active add-on licenses. If you want trial license, you can obtain all of that. And a lot of these things will be done from one dashboard. And you can kind of go from eval, POC to production conversions fairly simply. So those are like the innovations and simplifications that we're bringing in to provide a more natural SaaS activation experience. So this is all will be managed as part of the Easy Activation 2.0. Some of the customer benefits is, as I mentioned, a simplified experience. We'll have a subscription management page, eval to prod conversion within the dashboard itself, concurrent activation, so reduce the complete time for activation in parallel, and also the ability to handle activation failures and automatically raise stack tickets if you run into issues, so you don't have to call up multiple stakeholders to activate the service. So we will continue investing in this and simplifying that experience for our end customers. Moving to the next slide and kind of talking about what does this dashboard look like. So this is just a screenshot of what does that look like, where does the user land, how can they allocate licenses, what is the progress. So just kind of a lot of like more seamless experience from start to finish. The next one that I want to kind of talk about, so easy activation is available to all customers, and so is 1 Gbps support. So what we are doing with 1 Gbps support is we are seeing a lot of customers return to office. And with that, there is an increased bandwidth requirement for remote size. As part of that, we are increasing the support for the remote networks to 1 Gbps with full SSL decryption. The current limit is 500 Mbps. So with this, you will have the capability to support this feature. One thing that I want to highlight is this is available in aggregate bandwidth mode only, but it does reduce a lot of complexities that customers have, especially for high bandwidth sites. And this will be available for all customers with the 3.2 plugin change. And moving to the next slide. Oh, actually, that was the last one. Yeah. Any questions, Khurram, if